SBC Media.
Welcome to iGaming Daily, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe. Supported by SBC Summit Barcelona, the industry-leading conference bringing you the future of sports betting and iGaming.
SBC Summit Barcelona is where you can experience the entire global industry coverage under one roof. Join 10,000 industry professionals for 3 days of game-changing conversation and education. Get your tickets now at sbcevents.com.
Attention turns to the UK Gambling Commission as last week Executive Director for Policy Development, Tim Miller, announced that the regulator was ready to publish its first series of Gambling Review Consultations. As such, the UKGC is expected to publish 4 consultations on regulatory outcomes related to age verification, remote games design, direct marketing and cross-selling, and financial risk and vulnerability checks. The publishing of the white paper's consultations will mark the end of the purgatory UK gambling has been sentenced under its review. Yet, for the Commission concerns and skepticism remain on its long-term strategy, enforcement powers and handling of key issues and stakeholders. I'm your host, James Ross, and on today's episode of iGaming Daily, sponsored by SBC Summit Barcelona, I am joined today by Andrew McCarron, Managing Director at SBC. How are you doing today?
Hello, James. I'm not doing so bad. Thank you for inviting me to today's pod.
And if Andrew McCarron wasn't enough, later in the show, SBC News' senior journalist, Jessie is wandering around Amsterdam, and she'll be joining us later to explain what she's up to. Today is kind of a big turning point for the white paper after its announcement, and we kind of got the further consultation from you last time you was on the podcast talking about the white paper reveal. So from Tim Miller's blog, could you just provide us with a bit of an overview of the latest developments?
Well, this has been the next tranche of activity since the publication of the white paper back in March. As you remember, the white paper was long waited for. It had been waited for several years before anything was published, and people were just fed up of waiting. And hence the purgatory that you mentioned in your intro. And there was a lot of suggestions there on a lot of areas. And the thing is with the UK regulation, certainly if it's just tweaking around the edges rather than a whole new law, which is what this white paper is mainly recommended, is there's a legal requirement to consult on certain different areas. And what the white paper did was give the Commission what we call in football terms a hospital pass, where the ball, if someone passes the ball to you, but it's a bit too short, it gives you enough time for the defender to come in and completely take you out, and you end up being taken away from the pitch in an ambulance. So yes, the Gambling Commission has had its work cut out meeting the government's timeframes, basically.
Mm-hmm. It might be good just to kind of look at the 4 consultations that I did mention. It would be age verification, remote games design, direct marketing, and cross-selling, and financial risk and vulnerability checks. Quite a lot to get in there. Has there been any specifics on each of the consultations and what could come with them?
The interesting stuff, certainly around age verification, was talking about restricting gameplay to certainly stakes on slots, for example, to have a lower limit to those under 25. I mean, that's quite a new approach to the gambling industry. I mean, obviously we've had UK is quite unusual in that it has gambling products of some level that's available to play from birth, essentially. Some low-level gambling machines, like your crane grabbers when you go over a toy, that's actually classified as a gambling machine. And the pushers with your coins, that's also a gambling machine. But they also had slots, low-level slots, which are now being phased out voluntarily by the industry, actually. And they were always on lower stakes for under 18s. But this is the first time we've had an over 18s limit, a limit for age over 18. So that's a brand new approach. So that will be interesting to see what kind of pushback comes from there. What kind of response that will get. I'll be honest with you. I think people will be quite sanguine about it and willing to try it out. But at the end of the day, people age in different ways. So it's some 25-year-olds are about as mature as 16-year-olds, whereas you get some 16-year-olds that are more like 30 in their approach to different things. So it'd be interesting to see what happens with that. And certainly the other thing, which is probably the most controversial and most tricky to handle, is the financial risk and vulnerability checks. The white paper suggested they changed the terminology a little bit, but essentially it was a light touch financial check, financial well-being, I think it was, just for people spending so much over a period of a month. And there was one people, as a bunch of people on Twitter pointed out, that if people were to buy the Racing Post, which is the B2C gambling title, mainly for horse racing, as the name suggests, if somebody bought one of those, an issue every single day for a month, you'd actually be over the threshold for the next check. So I've got a feeling that will throw up a lot of, similar arguments that we've been hearing of late anyway. But I think that's where some of the, should we say, people that were upset at some of the lighter touch, I think that's where they will be trying to make their mark and potentially get the original suggestions tightened up.
These consultations, what's the next step now moving forward from this?
Well, this is the kind of breakneck pace that the Gambling Commission and the DCMS, which is the government body who's responsible for gambling in the UK, they've given themselves a lot to do, because they've given themselves a 12-month time frame to get these changes discussed, consulted, and implemented. The great thing about the Gambling Act 2005, as it was written, it gave it the flexibility to change as the times changed. A big disadvantage of that is they stopped doing the regular prevalence studies to allow them to see a bit more clearly how things were changing. But the idea behind it was the Gambling Commission could update the licence conditions and codes of practice, which essentially becomes law. I think it's a criminal offence not to you certainly lose your licence if you didn't follow them. And the Gambling Commission can make changes to that, and then the industry's got to fall in line for that. But to make some changes, they've got to be any changes to the LCCP, and there's another document, I can't remember the name of it at the moment. Any changes to that needs consultation. And it's got to be at least 12 weeks worth of consultation. And they're doing 4 at once is pretty unprecedented when it comes to this. And doing it over the summer period when people aren't in, just giving companies the chance to coordinate, again, get the data that they'd want to put into a submission to help the Gambling Commission and the DCMS make informed decisions. It's a tall ask. It's pretty breakneck pace, and I don't think it would make for good legislation. I mean, and when you bear in mind that the original consultation around what became the white paper, I mean, that was there was a call for evidence there that was open for 3 months, and they received 16,000 submissions for that. So it's no wonder it took so long, to be honest with you. I don't suggest any of these much more niche consultations will get any kind of feedback of those numbers, but they're still going to get a lot. And for them to be able to go through it, judge on different aspects, and push everything through for next summer, when they've got another set of consultations coming later on in the autumn, I'm glad I'm not on the commission payroll, that's for sure.
Once these consultations go through, they'll have to go through Parliament and government, correct? No,
not all of them. No, there's a couple of elements that was in the white paper where they know they need. It's called a secondary instrument to change some of the rules, and for that needs a vote in Parliament. At the moment, the UK Parliament is a complete basket case. Obviously, last year we had 3 prime ministers in the space of 3 months. This is a government that's dying as it's operating, and the latest it can hold on in power until December next year, which is probably why they've put such a strong emphasis on getting some of these changes done by next summer. So at least they've got.
That's where I was hinting at.
So at least they've got something to say. Look, we've managed to do something. To give them something to campaign about, but it won't help them. So yeah, there's some that will need these statutory instruments voting on. And in the white paper, it originally said when parliamentary time allows. That's not going to. There's very little time in Parliament at the moment to pass these things through. So it's I think they're more aspirational than anything else. I mean, there might be 1 or 2 that make it through if they find time. If the culture secretary finds it worthwhile, whoever the culture secretary might be at the time, because I was reading something in the papers this weekend. There's been more than 1 a year in the last since 2015. So there's not an awful lot of people showing any leadership on this anyway in the government. So who knows?
Has anything changed in these consultations since the white paper was launched?
Well, one thing that did change, and it's again, it was because it was a minor change. It was something they could do pretty quickly. And bear in mind, other things have happened that the industry has gone into voluntarily. So obviously, if the industry it says right, we'll do that, things can be implemented a lot quicker, even without consultation. So whether they're a good idea or a bad idea, it doesn't really get looked at too closely. But what the Gambling Commission did do was, it's a phrase I'm looking for. They clarified the responsibilities of white label providers. So these are essentially Gambling Commission licensees that run websites for different brands. So all the brands contribute to it really is marketing, and the brand do it. And then the technology behind it, the compliance behind it, that's all run by this white label supplier. And they've been quite controversial for a while. Back in 2019, there was a big focus on a couple of the brands that ended up having to leave the UK market because of the way they operated for one reason or another. They happened to be on a white label deal. And the brands, the Asian-facing brands that you see on a lot of Premier League shirts, they're all white labels. Most of them tend to be from the same white label provider on the Isle of Man. But they need that UK license to be allowed to advertise in the UK, even though they're not advertising, they're not interested in UK players, they want the Asian players. So the cheap way of them doing it is to go on one of these white label deals, which then notionally gives them a license to advertise on the shirts. So there was a push, certainly when Tom Watson was deputy head of Labour Party, who's the opposition party, to ban white labels completely. That has been completely softened now. That the controversy around those shirt sponsorship aside has disappeared somewhat. So now the Gambling Commission just sort of doubled down to these licensees who supply the white label deals. You should do more due diligence with who you're doing with. Be more aware of their marketing activity. Because the book stops with you.
Perfect. And just to round this up, there was also mention by Miller about the future of statutory levies to fund problem gambling research, education and treatment, RET programs. What else was stated for the future of statutory levies?
I think this might be the one that needs a vote in Parliament, but that would probably get nodded through because no one's going to say, no, we don't want more money for gambling problem charities. Well, but at the moment there's a big schism, would I say, with the NHS essentially lobbying to take all that money. And at the moment there's the industry is funding third-party suppliers, a bit like your Epic Risk Management, a bit like Bet No More, GamCare as well. Obviously, some of these are long-running organisations, certainly been involved with treating gambling problems way longer than the NHS has. And there's a fear that they will now get cut out if it goes through government, and government can just say, oh, look, we're just funding the NHS with another 100 million without any oversight or, to be honest with you, care as to where that money's going and how efficient it will be used. So that's one of those things that are bumbling under, and I expect it'll be one of the more controversial things coming out of this white paper.
Perfect. Andy, thank you for joining us to go through these latest Gambling Review consultation updates. For the listeners out there, if you want to know even more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, I've included a link in the description below to direct you straight to SBC News' article on the very topic. However, though, Andy is leaving us, but the show goes on because, as promised earlier in the show, Jessie Sale, the senior journalist at SBC News, is joining us live from Amsterdam. And here she is. Hello, Jessie. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thank you, James. You can probably hear there's so much going on here. I'm having a brilliant time.
Yeah, it sounds electric behind you, to be fair. And I think the listeners actually want to know, why are you currently in Amsterdam?
I'm currently in Amsterdam because I'm attending the IGB Live conference, which kicked off this morning.
Perfect. And can you just provide us with a bit of an overview of how your morning's been? Has there been any interesting discussions?
So this morning I sat in on 2 panel sessions. First was called The Future of iGaming in the Netherlands, Post-Advertising Ban. And that was with René Jansen, who is the chairman of the Dutch Gambling Authority. So moderated by Robin Harrison, who's Global Content Director at Clarion Events, the session delved into how the market is changing after just 12 days into the new legislation of a ban on non-targeted advertising, and how this has come as a relief for many people, and also any future concerns that you may have on this. The second conference session I sat in on was called Europe's iGaming Industry, Striving for a Sustainable Future. This session looked into how regulation and market expansion can find harmony, what exciting prospects lie ahead for the industry, and explored each regulator's key priorities over the next 2 years. Perfect.
And, that was your morning. It's now, I believe it's nearly 2 p.m. local time in Amsterdam. So how is your afternoon shaping up? What's on your agenda?
So my day continues to be filled with lots of networking and also conference sessions again, as I'll be sitting in on the panel titled Navigating the Regulatory Landscape, Proven Strategies for Operators, where SoftSwiss's Chief Commercial Officer will be sharing his presentation on how operators can excel in regulated markets.
Perfect. And IGB Live, it continues tomorrow. What have you got to look forward to?
Tomorrow I'm going to sit on a panel on AI, which should be interesting, following obviously a recent spike of interest in it, whether it's helping the industry, hurting the industry, or even replacing it, they're suggesting. There's 4 speakers on that, and then I'm going to be listening to Thomas Willomitzer after that, who's the founder and CEO of SnapOdds, and he's speaking of SnapOdds live TV recognition, which is also known as Shazam for sports betting. So the idea is that SnapScreen gives people a visual approach with the same idea with regards to sports betting, so you can point to the screen at any live sports event on TV and the relevant betting information will come up for that game, which I think is really cool. So it'll be a good one to go to.
Yeah, perfect. And it sounds like your schedule's absolutely rammed, but it does sound exciting. Jessie, I'm going to leave you here because you've got a lot of things on your plate and it sounds fun and exciting over there. So go and enjoy yourself. But just thank you for taking time out to speak to us today at IGB Live in Amsterdam.
Thanks so much, Jane. Speak to you soon.
Thank you. Bye. And for our listeners out there, if you want any information on the topics discussed today in the podcast, click on the link in the description below. Again, Andy, Jessie, thank you for joining us, and to our listeners, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of iGaming Daily, brought to you in conjunction with SBC Summit Barcelona, being held at the Fira Barcelona Montjuic on the 19th to the 21st of September. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News Network, or check out the latest edition of the SBC Leaders magazine. Happy reading.